everyone. I think we were going to get started, so again, please feel free to shift up. We want to leave space in the room for latecomers. Thank you all so much for making it out in this weather in particular. While there are some things, like snow, that we definitely can't change, it's important that we gather together like this and coordinate our efforts against all odds. So really, thank you for coming. So my name is Mikey McGovern, and I'm one of the organizers of Free Xiyue Wang, the graduate student group that put this event together. And I'll speak more on that in a minute. So I'm going to say some brief words to set the tone for this evening, and then tell you a little bit more about what you're going to be hearing tonight. I've never met Xiyue Wang. As I was packing up my life in Chicago to start a new one in Princeton, he was packing up his things in Iran to return to the rich life he began as a student in Princeton with his wife, Hua, and his son, Xiaofan. He had traveled to Iran after changing around his research plans to take advantage of the opportunity to work on his Farsi and to look at documents regarding the Qajar dynasty in the 19th century and their influence throughout the Eurasian region. These plans were approved by the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The day before his return to Princeton in the summer of 2016, Wang was approached by men who claimed to be members of Iran's diplomatic police. They confiscated his laptop and passport and forbade him from leaving the country without further instruction. On August 7th, Iranian authorities arrested Wang and kept him in solitary confinement in the notorious Evin prison for more than 2 weeks. He was later sentenced to 10 years for espionage. I probably don't need to remind this audience, but Wang is innocent. The charges against him are entirely fabricated. Since that summer, he's been moved around between different wards in Evin prison. Those of us at Princeton didn't even hear about him for months. His health has fluctuated, and he is unable to pursue the work he set out to do as a PhD student. Moreover, he's been kept apart from his colleagues, friends, and his young family in Princeton, unable to pursue the life he wants to live. Many of you have heard this painful story before, but it bears repeating. Things move quickly on this campus, especially among graduate students, as we transition from coursework through exams and then on to the field. Many students, like myself, have never met Wang. A number of his colleagues and close friends are finishing their PhDs now and moving on to an ever-uncertain job market. We have to do our best to keep his spirit alive on this campus and in the hearts and minds of Americans as one of us, a student and an American citizen. Now, it's easy to be overwhelmed by what has happened, to think of this as only an exceptional circumstance. Make no mistake, it is one. But it is also a tragedy with violence on a local scale at a daily rate. In keeping Wang away from his family, Hua and Xiaofan are deprived of their husband and father. In keeping Wang away from his work, his field is deprived of one of its most promising scholars. And in keeping Wang away from us, we are all deprived of a valuable member of our community, whose brilliance and kindness would otherwise be a boon to us all. That's why we have formed this group, as students and as citizens, to keep agitating for Wang's case and spreading the word through the wide networks we academics and people on university campuses have. It seems like we may have no power in the face of diplomatic obstacles, but this is simply not true. The university has been committed to supporting Wang, Hua, and Xiaofan through financial and diplomatic resources. Nonetheless, it is this kind of constant, daily activism that can keep Wang's case alive and make sure that it is heard by the right people who can help. We saw many members of our community come together to reach out to government officials through phone, mail, and social media, and we hope to see more. And thank you again to anyone who was able to come out for the call-a-thon we hosted earlier today. So we're planning to host more events like this in the coming months, in tandem with other universities, and ramp up our efforts more generally. We would like you to join us. If you're interested in volunteering or would like to be updated on our efforts, you can sign up in the back table over there, just to the side, or visit freexiuewang.com and look under the Help Out tab. We'll try to remind you of this throughout the rally. So to wrap up my shtick here, I'm really happy that this day is here, snow notwithstanding, and wanted to convey to you before we begin that pulling together in such a short amount of time took the efforts of so many people. Our organizing committee came together in January to strategize and put this event together, and I'd like to thank them all individually. Mai Nguyen, who can't be here tonight, Bernat Guyen Pegaroles, Casey Albert, and from a distance, Richard Spiegel and Felice Viziar. From the university, Lisa Schreier and Dan Day have been invaluable resources helping us to do this on such short notice. Funding from the Department of History, Graduate Student Government, and Undergraduate Student Government have made it all possible. Last of all, I'd like to thank Hua, and to say that we are all here for you and Xiaofan. So with that, I'll stop talking for a while, but not before giving you a quick overview of the order of events. We'll be hearing from a number of speakers, each of whom I will introduce. We will then dim the lights further and turn on the candles. Some of you have them on already. You can keep them on, it's fine. And when we do that, we'll observe a few minutes of silence. You can then just hand your candles at the back out there. It's sort of weird weather right now, so if we're feeling it, we can all walk out together as a group, or people can go off their separate ways. But we'll decide on this by the end of the evening. So, without further ado, there's perhaps no one more important here this evening than our first speaker, Hua Chu, Xiyue Wang's wife and tireless advocate. Everyone, Hua.
Thank you so much for coming out in such nasty weather and being here with us today. When I stepped into this beautiful rotunda and gathered with Xiyue's friends and his professors and many, many people who have become my friends in the past 3 years, the energies channeled in this warm space deeply touched my heart. I would like to thank Princeton University for everything you're doing towards Xiyue's freedom. Thank you to all the speakers and to every one of you who made phone calls and sent letters to raise awareness of Xiyue's situation. Thank you. Every action helps. I would also like to especially thank all the organizers and volunteers. To Mikey, Taylor, Mai, Bernard, Cassie, and many others.
It's so fun.
And for all your hard work to make the day of action happen today. It means a lot to Xiyue, who was sentenced to 10 years on false charges of espionage and has been unjustly held in Evan prison for 928 days. That doubles the time the American diplomats were held hostage from 1979 to 1981. Evan prison is easy to find on Google Earth. I used to zoom in to examine the landscape and the clusters of the grayish-blue buildings as if I could find him behind the walls. I looked for a courtyard where I could imagine Xiyue spending his precious daily hour of open air. But the closer I zoom in, the more blurred the image becomes and the clearer the futility of our situation. In the summer of 2016, I was startled by a late midnight call from Xiyue. That is when I learned that he had been approached by men who claimed to be Iran's diplomatic police, and they had confiscated his laptop and passport. Even in that awful moment, I had no idea how badly our lives would be overturned. Our trauma began with his abrupt detention, followed by the physical and emotional ordeals he had to endure throughout the 6 months long interrogations, 20 days solitary confinement, harsh conditions in political prison, and a trial without a shred of evidence or due process. On the other side of the world, my daily life is like a roller coaster. I'm juggling every day with crisis management, a full-time job, and the challenges of parenting as a single working mom. 3 years later, this burden is taking a toll on my 5-year-old son, Xiaofan, who is turning 6 in March and hasn't seen his dad for more than half of his young childhood. Xiyue's only alleged crime is his research for his own PhD dissertation. He is a graduate student at Princeton, studying for a PhD in Eurasian history in the late 19th century and early 20th century. He was in Tehran on a research trip that had been pre-approved by the Iranian government with a letter of introduction from Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He wanted to compare the governance practices across national boundaries in this largely Muslim area, an ambitious project that grew out of his long-standing respect for Islam and for his love for Persian culture. His project required him to sift through mundane manuscripts in the Qajar dynasty a century ago, to look for common threads and to see how and when good governance practices emerged. Needless to say, the old manuscripts he needed to peruse were hardly exciting, had nothing to do with any contemporary politics, and were certainly not confidential. Xiyue is a born scholar, diligent and passionate. Even in prison, books, when he can get a hold of them, are one of his few comforts to escape the harsh conditions at Evan. Sitting in the middle level of a 3-level bunk bed, he cannot even straighten his back, but with books in his hands, he is able to block the noises and smells from over 20 cellmates cramped into that underground cold cell, and to stay focused as if he were in his beloved Firestone Library that he cherishes fondly. In the first year of his unlawful arrest, Xiyue was only allowed to call 10 minutes every Wednesday. Shaofan had no chance to speak with his father then. In such brief calls, Xiyue anxiously passed his distressed bullet points of tasks to me as if I had a magic wand to bring him home. Sometimes he was heartbroken and despairing, and sometimes he tried to be more optimistic, promising me that when he came back, everything will be fine. In the meanwhile, Shaofan is growing up without his father. Most of the time, he is cheerfully oblivious. He loves drawing his own stories, but most of them are about jails bursting in flames, men wearing black clothes with chains in hands, their faces covered. Shaofan still cannot fully engage in the phone calls with his father, reluctant to respond to eager questions about his daily life from his father still far away. Xiyue often brings up memories of Shaofan when he was little, such as the funny baby songs he made, or the beautiful afternoons when he rode on Xiyue's shoulders walking home from daycare. Shaofan no longer shares those memories. He was too young to remember these. He is a boy intrigued by the flags of foreign countries and the stories of their landmarks or unique animals. He was thrilled when he learned interesting facts such as that polar bears have black skin. Xiyue was thrilled too when I told him this. Even after Shaofan stopped listening, he kept talking to me about his fascinating tidbit about polar bears. Xiyue is an innocent man, a loving father, a caring husband, and a genuine friend. Xiyue is also an American citizen. It is for this reason that he is being held. So far, neither the Obama administration in power when he was taken, nor the Trump administration have been able to do anything for us, for Xiyue's freedom. I have tried not to lose hope, but it has become clear to me that the value that Iran places on him as American is not matched by his own government's commitment to bring him home. Neither administration has seriously engaged in talks with the Iranian government. it is obvious that the life of one American does not attract the political will that required for decisive action to be taken for his rightful freedom. Xiyue is a scholar with a deep love for the people of Iran. The only purpose of his visit was to learn about Iran's language and its history. He is a scholar of a region of the world that he admires and respects. He found the Iranian archives and the libraries important and stimulating places for his academic interest in pre-modern history of the Eurasian continent. Xiyue deeply respects the pride that Iranian people take in their great history and rich culture. And I hope the Iranian government and its people know how privileged Xiyue felt to be carrying out his research there. Like all children in this world, Shaofan needs his father. Shaofan asks why his father cannot play with him and doubts that he will ever come back again. Our lives have been shattered and we're struggling to rebuild them without Xiyue here. I'm doing all I can for his return, but years pass and nothing I do is enough. I plead for the gate of mercy to be opened for my husband's liberty and the reunion of our family. Thank you, everyone.
Our next speaker, Joshua Bachner, is a PhD candidate in the history department in Wang's cohort and is going to offer us a few words on Wang as a colleague.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Joshua Bachner, and I met Wang, as some of us in the cohort came to know him as, in 2013 when we began our degrees together. Today I'll speak briefly to Wang as a student, scholar, and intellectual, whom I got to know better when we started writing our dissertations and whom I've continued to be inspired by in our phone conversations. Outside of our focus on the late 19th and early 20th centuries, we do not, in fact, share many overt research interests. Wang is a historian of empire and power in Central Asia, and I of physiology and everyday life in the German-speaking world. We first got together to discuss some practical matters about writing a dissertation, language abilities, archival challenges. But as novices in each other's area, our conversation was soon dominated by questions. One question in particular spanned both our projects: how to connect material analyses of everyday culture with broader ones of state formation, in Wang's case, or of scientific investigation in mine. We really had absolutely no idea how to do this. And while we attempted to use standard historiographical and theoretical tools to forge an answer, what I remember most strongly was Wang's commitment to further querying each suggestion and idea. In a kind and generous manner, he persisted in following each thread further and further with questions, with no topic too large or too small. He didn't ask out of politesse or cynicism or rote academic custom. He asked because he truly wanted to learn something new. And he truly wanted me to understand something new as well. This may well sound trite, like sound bites advocating for the liberal arts, but I, as well as everyone else who will speak today, assure you that Wang completely embodies this drive. Not to know something for the sake of knowing, nor to know it as a balm for the soul or as a guide to action, but to know it as a meaningful act of understanding itself, to place it within the perpetual revision of our shared vocations literature. One of the texts I read to Wang over the summer during our phone calls was a new history of the Habsburg Empire. He had a copy of the book, but a number of pages were missing. I read aloud, and he transcribed by hand, filling out the book for a later full reading. But with each new page, we went down little historical alleyways propelled by the same questioning spirit. One passage on the revolutionary events of 1848, specifically how Vienna physically fostered and constrained the movement, led Wang to ask me about present-day Vienna, where I was at the time, and what physically remained of the scenes we were reading. He told me his memories of the city and asked about the different archives I was visiting. We discussed what it means to read your sources in situ, to look out the window of the library at the very site you are reading about. Explaining to the public what exactly professional historians do and why we do it is always a challenge. This seems particularly true in Wang's case, especially as portrayed in news coverage. Why would somebody undertake to write a history of where Afghanistan met the Qing and Russian empires in the late 19th century? What is the contemporary practical import of such a project? Most simply, this period and place is one of the few around the globe where our contemporary historical understanding remains very thin. Taking on this project was a testimony at once to Wang's unique linguistic skills and historiographic knowledge, and to his commitment to an insatiable drive to know something in a meaningful way that wasn't known before. And I know that this drive still persists as we continue to speak on the phone. As may already be clear from my terminology, I myself have begun to understand Wang's scholarly orientation, especially as it has been an inspiration for me and my own, via Max Weber's lecture, Scholarship as a Vocation. In that century-old text, Weber tells us that the value of scholarship cannot be attested objectively or abstractly, but only in its affirmative practice by committed people. We must go about our work and meet the demands of the day, both in our human relations and in our vocational ones. This is the orientation and practice I have found so inspiring about Wang's work as a scholar and as a colleague, a repeated affirmation of the value of research and inquiry. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker, Keith A. Welu, is the Henry Putnam University Professor of History and Public Affairs, as well as the current chair of the History Department.
It's an honor to join you today as the chair of the History Department, speaking on behalf of many of our faculty, staff, and students, to join my voice to yours in appealing for Xiyue Wang's freedom from unjust imprisonment in Iran. I'll be brief. I'd like to say that, as we all know, Wang came to Princeton and with his family to pursue his academic dream, to nurture the embers of his academic passion. And he developed that passion alongside students like Josh, with the assistance of an outstanding faculty like Professor Kotkin and many others. And in our view, the deep injustice of his imprisonment is felt every day. Denied the chance to pursue that dream, and denied and in a continued absence from that intellectual community. Denied the chance to spend time studying, writing, and exchanging ideas about 19th and 20th century Eurasian history, removed from his peer group of dissertation writing students who are turning their archival research into rich and insightful new historical understanding. Absent daily from friends, and most importantly, most immediately, denied the basic freedom to be with his loving family every hour and every day. Over the past almost 2 years, it has been my privilege to speak occasionally with Wang, and those conversations reinforce my sadness and anger about his plight, and my admiration for this earnest, direct, incredibly talented, brilliant man who is devoted both to his studies and his family still. Sometimes we discuss the university or developments relating to his case, but often the conversation turns to his family, his desire that they be supported fully by friends, the department, and the university. Every occasional talk that we have reinforces my appreciation for what a kind, thoughtful, and devoted father and husband he is. None of us who've had the honor of speaking with him can appreciate fully what it's like for him once he hangs up the phone. To my work, or I walk over to Nassau Hall to fill in university officials like Bob Durkee about his concerns, to pass those ideas along, and also occasionally to talk with you on his behalf, and to be here to support the collective call for his freedom. But these are in some ways really important, and yet they're very small and easy things to do, to take on, compared to the uncertainties and challenges that Wang endures daily. And yet, though his morale may flag from time to time, I'm continually impressed by the fact that he presses on, as do we, and particularly Hua, whose work I admire so much, supported by her friends and classmates of Wang. We continue to do what we can to ensure that he returns to us, a free man and a student once again. It's an understatement to say that he won't be forgotten. Rather, as events like this highlight, Wang has become an important rallying cry for subsequent cohorts of graduate students in history and elsewhere at the university who see his struggle as something that they are deeply connected to. His situation has become entwined with the daily, weekly, monthly, and semester by semester working reality of the history department, and it will remain so. I admire the immense work that the graduate students, the GHA, and many others have done to join with his remarkable wife, Hua, in continuing to draw attention to his plight, to highlight the injustice, to bring other people and organizations, all the way to the State Department and the UN, into the fight for his freedom, and to ensure that the bright light of his intellect and academic dream will be sustained despite his imprisonment. The History Department, its faculty, staff, and students stand ready, hopeful for the day that we can welcome him back to Princeton and to Dickinson Hall, so that this nightmare can end and that his academic dream can resume, so that once again we are able to nurture the embers of his academic dream, so that it can be fully rekindled as a flame. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Taylor Zychek, has been one of the organizers of the Free Xiyue Wang effort, who I forgot to mention before, so I could single him out here, and is largely responsible for bringing everything together on this now turning to be beautiful night, so we could get.
And a member of the leadership team of the Free Xiyue working group. A lot has been said already, but I'm here to speak about the nature of our group and also to tell you about some ways that you can participate and help sustain its efforts this year and into the future. So the Free Xiyue working group is officially recognized by the university and exists to coordinate and centralize efforts on Xiyue's behalf beyond any sort of sporadic efforts. Particularly as the sentence drags on towards its third year, it's important for us as a campus to keep Xiyue in the front of our community's consciousness in a way that outlasts any single cohort or any single department. It's a sad fact that members of Xiyue's cohort will be soon graduating and defending their dissertations, so it's important for those of us in earlier years to continue these efforts as former activists finish their tenure here at Princeton. With this group, we are building institutional memory, expertise, and momentum, most importantly. So in the weeks and months following this rally, we aim to ramp up our outreach on campus, in the Princeton community, and beyond, coordinating with national and international organizations such as Scholars at Risk, which will, a representative from their organization will speak after me. So as Mikey mentioned earlier, we need your help as volunteers. If you visit freexiyue.com, you'll see that there are several options to volunteer, ranging in degrees of time commitment, from a single tweet to an afternoon to as much free time as you're humanly willing to give. First, you can join our leadership team and help coordinate events, social media campaigns, and share your talents. In particular, we're looking for a graphic designer, if anyone has Illustrator in the audience. Second, you can staff a free Xiyue table at an existing event on Princeton to help maintain our presence on campus and especially with the undergraduate community. Third, if you are a member of an organization, a professional or academic, or visiting from another university, we will help you organize a satellite rally or a call-a-thon, or similar events that have been held today. And we will support you with contacts and other materials. We are, of course, also soliciting other suggestions if you're willing to share them. As has been mentioned earlier, it's not necessary that you be one of Xiyue's friends or even to have met him. I met Xiyue only briefly while visiting as a prospective student. Although we only met one time in person, it was a meaningful conversation. His enthusiasm and passion for this department and this institution is part of the reason why I chose to study here. I've since gotten to know him better over our phone conversations as we've discussed our scholarship and our mutual passion for Eurasian history. It's a sobering reality that what happened to Xiyue could have happened to many of us in this room, particularly those of us who spend time with our research abroad. So I'm reminded of this every day at Princeton, using Firestone's library, spending time at home with my own spouse. So it's important that we demonstrate our solidarity. Despite his imprisonment, as has been mentioned, Xiyue is full of ideas for future projects on some of the most understudied regions of the world. These are begging to be written and begging to be read. If you have any questions on how you can help or how you can participate, please visit our website or our volunteer table, or you can reach out to any of us who have spoken tonight. So thank you for your attention.
Our next speaker comes to us from Scholars at Risk, an international advocacy group dedicated to defending the human rights of scholars around the world as they pursue difficult and important work, as Wang does. Daniel Munier is the Senior Program Officer for Scholars at Risk's advocacy team and works on various cases of imprisonment, in addition to reporting on attacks on higher education communities through the organization's Academic Freedom Monitoring Project. Dan, we're really excited to welcome you to Princeton.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Hua, for inviting me to be here with you this evening to share some brief remarks. On behalf of my colleagues at Scholars at Risk, I'd like to commend all of you, Wang and Hua's family and friends, faculty, students, administrators, and staff of Princeton University, and members of the local community for putting together this very important evening and series of events to come. It's been 927 some odd days that Wang has been wrongfully jailed, subjected to physical and psychological abuse, and denied basic human rights. 927 days away from his family and friends. 927 some odd days removed from his work in the Princeton community. After 927 days of this nightmare, now more than ever we need to fight for Wang. Standing with Wang's family and friends tonight, calling members of Congress to act, and raising awareness of the unthinkable experience he and his family have been through are of course necessary to secure Wang's freedom. But these actions also demonstrate our collective commitment to protecting academic freedom and the related rights and values we hold dear as scholars, students, university leaders, as members of democratic society. Academic freedom is our right to teach, to learn, to conduct research, to publish, and to disseminate new knowledge. Simply put, it's our freedom to think, question, and share ideas. Academic freedom is the cornerstone of quality higher education institutions. Institutions that spark progress only by hearing, debating, and testing theories and concepts without retribution and without undue restriction. When academic freedom comes under attack, it's not just the immediate scholar or student and their family who suffer. The wider academic community suffers, and so does democratic society. Because when even one academic is silenced, we are all deprived of the benefits of that scholar's contributions to the academic community. And we were all told that asking difficult but necessary questions can come at a very high cost. Unfortunately, far too many scholars, like Wang, are punished for exercising their right to academic freedom. At Evin Prison, where Wang now spends his days, Iranian authorities have trapped countless scholars and intellectuals over the years. They include Omid Kokabi, a PhD student of physics arrested for refusing to work on Iranian military research projects; Ahmadreza Jalali, a scholar of disaster medicine who's sentenced to death on charges that stem from his international academic connections; and Kavus Sayed Imami, professor of sociology and an environmentalist who was found dead in an Evin prison jail cell under suspicious circumstances just over 1 year ago from today. But it's not only Evin prison or Iran where we see this crisis unfolding. Zooming out, attacks on scholars, students, and the university space are occurring at alarming rates around the globe. In Nicaragua, students have been subject to violent, often lethal force for demanding democratic reforms. In Turkey, thousands of academics have been dismissed from jobs, banned from academia, and prosecuted for expression and alleged associations disfavored by the state. In Eastern and Central Europe, anti-democratic governments are threatening to shut down entire scholarly institutions. And even here in the United States, rhetoric and policy that undermines science and facts risk shrinking the American university space. These attacks manifest in different forms and at different scales around the world, but they are bound together by a common motivation to restrict learning and to punish ideas. Wang's imprisonment in this global crisis of attacks on academic freedom should be alarming and should compel all who value healthy university spaces and strong democracies to take action. The road ahead is daunting, but being here tonight with Wang's family, friends, and the Princeton community gives me hope. Hope that your calls to Washington will move Congress and will move the White House to take all available actions on Wang's behalf. But to be sure, our calls and our advocacy must be sustained. They must not waver over time, and we must stress that we are asking for two things. First, Wang's safe return to Princeton and his family. And second, a reaffirmation of the United States' commitment to academic freedom, human rights, and to democratic values. Scholars at Risk look forward to continuing to work with all of you on these crucial efforts to secure Wang's return back to Princeton. And we look forward to working with you on safeguarding our rights as scholars and students to continue to exercising our right to freedom of expression, academic freedom, the right to be free in the university space. Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker, Liz Lempert, is the first mayor of Consolidated Princeton. She's spoken at previous rallies for Wang's case, and we are delighted to have her back with us on this snowy evening. Liz Lempert. If she is here. Let's see her. That's okay, Jay. There's a lot of snow. We'll sequence Liz later, and we'll see if she's able to make it later on. So, in place of Liz Lambert, then, our next speaker will be Sarah Jane Leslie, who is the Dean of the Graduate School at Princeton.
Good evening. Thanks so much to everyone for coming out tonight in support of Xiyue Wang. Although he may be more than 6,000 miles away from us, he's always here in our hearts at Princeton. As Dean of the Graduate School, I know that I speak for all members of our Princeton University community in reiterating our full, unwavering support for Wang, for Hua, and for Xiaofang. This day of action is another demonstration of our determination to do all that we can to bring him home. Allow me to express my heartfelt gratitude to the graduate students who organized today's events. You have planned and carried out an exceptional effort to keep Wang's unjust detention in the public eye and to call upon our elected officials and others to obtain his release as soon as possible. Wang is a talented young Princeton scholar in the Department of History. He went to Iran in 2016 to study the Farsi language and do research for his PhD dissertation, as so many of our students on campus do every single day. He traveled there to study decades-old archival materials on the history of the Qajar dynasty, which ruled from the late 18th to the early 20th century. The espionage charges against him are nothing short of a sham, as the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention noted unequivocally. The report that was issued last fall said that there was no legal basis for Wang's detention, and it called for his immediate release. And yet here we are, still waiting. On this day of action, every phone call made, every message sent on Wang's behalf, every person present here in this room reaffirms the resolute spirit of the community to continue to work for his safe release. Your presence here also reaffirms the deep commitment of this community to support Wang during his unjust detention and to provide in whatever way we can comfort and assistance to Hua and Xiaofan. While I have no words for how much we admire your courage and determination in working tirelessly to secure your husband's release, and Xiaofan, our hearts go out to you for having to live with the painful uncertainty of when your dad will return and once again be a loving presence in your young life. We thank our government officials and their representatives who have joined us here today, and we thank our many academic colleagues and many organizations around the world who have joined us in pressing for Wang's release. Every flicker of every candle in this room represents another moment in which Wang is deprived of his rightful place among his family, his colleagues, and his friends here at Princeton, and another day in which we are deprived of his presence in our lives. May the light and the warmth that we generate this evening remind the world of his unjust plight. And may this day of action lead to his swift release from Princeton, and upon his safe return home, turn into a day, indeed many days, of rejoicing. Thank you all.
Okay, so as scheduled, Sarah Jane will have been our last speaker. Liz Limpert unfortunately has had to cancel due to ice on the roads. So I wanted to just wrap things up here by asking us all to reflect a little bit on what's been said over the course of this evening. Reflections on Wang's character, his commitment to scholarship, and the value of academic freedom that undergirds the work that we all do. So thinking about that, thinking about the meaning of his case for his family and for our community more broadly, I'm going to ask us to hold a few minutes of silence. So we'll dim the lights here, and as we raise them, we will exit the building and proceed on to the evening. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.